Did you watch the Super Bowl yesterday?
I did.
What does that mean?
I mean, it was a bummer of an ending if you like the Niners, but that's it was a good football game.
But I'm from Kansas City, so why would I be bummed?
You can be. I'm happy you're happy.
Yeah, I mean, the best team won, right? So
That's how it works.
hey,
But
I'm gonna tell you. You go ahead. What are you gonna say?
well, I really like the way the Niners play offense a lot. It's a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun to watch.
Losing? You like?
No, just the style of play. They the trick plays, the flea flickers, all that stuff. I like that.
Win Super Bowls?
No, not this year.
Yeah, not
Not
this year.
this year. That's for
Although
sure.
I did not know the story of Purdy.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of fun. His
Now-
story is fantastic.
That story was with Purdy. That's impressive. And then
Right.
okay, let me start from the beginning. I didn't have a team that I was rooting for. I wanted to see the Detroit Lions and I wanted to see Baltimore in the Super Bowl.
Okay.
That's what I wanted.
That would have been that would have been like Cars versus Steel. But historically speaking, the things that made the cities once great.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. No, you're right. And and still they're not making a comeback. Not only in Super Bowl, but just the period.
Instead we got Gold Rush Banking versus what made Kansas City great. It was the when it was founded, it was the entryway to the Missouri River. Is that right?
Well, you had Wyatt Earp and all those guys too in Kansas.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's probably cattle and
with the 49ers, it's hard to say because now you have what's that big tech kind of
now it's big tech, but it was founded on Gold Rush banking.
That Jason Whitlock's piece talks about that a little bit. You ever read his piece on 49ers and how? Oh, I can't recommend that enough. He basically tells you how we get such a gay San Francisco.
Oh yeah. Well, so we were when we were in Santa Cruz. We the one of the places that I surfed and that had a pizza place that I took my family to a lot was called Pleasure Point because there were 3 whorehouses there for the 49er cruise to come down. They would drop the family off in Santa Cruz and then they would come down to Capitola. All the quote unquote men without their wives would come down and to the whorehouses, and so it's no wonder you ended up
being so gay.
Yeah.
Well,
but my favorite thing was there was a church there called Pleasure Point Community Church, and I met the pastor, and he didn't know where the term Pleasure Point came from, and I was like, "That's great, you said you guys have replaced the whorehouses. You're out right where there used to be whorehouses. Now there's a church. That's fantastic."
Kind of all just come up the open now. There's no doors where that stuff hides behind anymore, right? That's unfortunate, but yeah. So okay, I got to start in the most obvious thing. Usher halftime show.
It was fantastic. I really liked it.
I gave it 2 thumbs up. It was a good halftime show.
It was. I think I was trying to figure out who the rapper was in that ridiculous helmet.
Oh yeah, I think that's Will I Am, wasn't it? Was that Will?
That makes sense.
But then, dude was so fat. I was like, Will ain't been that big. Like that, it can't be Will. So I'm still up to be corrected, but I was like, I think that's Will I Am with the with the black.
Yeah, screen. Yeah. I was like, at first I was like, it must be one of those new people that hide their faces, and then I was like, no, it can't be. That doesn't. You wouldn't put them in the Super Bowl like Marshmello or whatever.
It doesn't make any sense for anybody else to come on when that song goes da 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 da. It's like that's Will I Am's joint, so it gotta be Will.
Yeah, but I couldn't tell through the helmet. Anyway,
yeah. Did you see the little lollipop kid? What was going on with Jermaine Dupri? Why did he dress like that?
I have no idea.
He dressed like a schoolgirl. You know, it makes sense. He is from Atlanta.
No. Oh, okay. Okay.
So the effeminacy kind of coming off on him made a little sense. But Usher, I only have a couple critiques with Usher. But it was overall, I think it could have been worse. Right. That's
yeah.
That
was my thought too. I was like, oh, look at that. They're not trying to, be controversial. They're just trying to give people what they want. I love the roller skating.
The roller skating took it back. Yeah. He's been doing that almost every day in his Vegas show.
Oh, so really?
The roller skating thing, he added to his repertoire a while ago, but he's been so
I think what's amazing. So, a couple of things. One, I felt old because I was like last year, because you put the people in the Super Bowl that are old enough that the most of the people are going to know who they are. You don't, because you're not going after the young hip kids in the Super Bowl halftime show, right? So you're like, oh, and they've tried that with like Katy Perry when she was kind of at her peak, and it failed miserably because everybody was like, who is this? Because most of the people that are, you don't have a ton of teenagers watching. But so I was like, oh, apparently I am now classic, on the classic rock station, and I'm old school hip hop now. And
yep.
Because the Super Bowl is the people that I listen to when I'm feeling what's it called? When you're nostalgic. So, but
I realized I was old when I was working with some young cats. They're like 17 and 20, and they were like, Usher still makes music.
But Usher has a Vegas show, so that's old.
That's like old now.
Second round of Elvis's life,
right? But that was some of his best stuff, though. That's when he started really hitting it.
Oh, it's totally true, but it is still like Vegas Elvis means now you're old enough to that people that are out gambling, people that are pulling slots for entertainment because they've got enough money they've got enough cash to do that, are interested.
One of the kids asked, who is Usher? I was like, 11 o'clock on the dot. I'm in my drop. You don't know who Usher is?
I'm sure they've heard the songs because they're pretty ubiquitous, but he's not. I mean, he's pretty old, but all I could think about.
He's 45. What do you mean?
I mean, old? To be up on stage and dancing, and
he's 45.
I know he's
Satchel Paige was pitching at 59 and pitched 3 innings, I think, at least, without having anybody, like no hitters for 3. At 59.
Was he a knuckleballer? How's he still pitching at 59?
I don't know, but I know he had a recliner and some masseuse over there in the bullpen. And he had like a whole bunch of help in a special kind of chair, and the dad was like, "Ooh, baby, rub my feet."
But when Ludacris came out, all I could think about was Cat Williams.
Oh wow! You know what was better though? I was surprised. Little John stole the show. Little John looked better than everybody else. I mean, he had on cowboy boots with black leather. That's hard to pull off as a black dude. He did it. And he looked absolutely good. I was like, all right, Little John, looking like you've been maturing well, unlike the rest of some of y'all. I was impressed.
Well, Alicia Keys looked fantastic too.
Alicia Keys sound horrible.
I mean, that piano, there's no way that piano is ever going to sound good. The thing was made of plexiglass, so
yeah,
a plexiglass piano.
Let's be honest, that's not what we heard. They don't play any real instruments up there anyway, so it wasn't like you heard that piano. You didn't hear that piano.
That might be true. I actually don't know. I didn't.
No, they don't. They don't allow them to play real instruments.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, they record it, and then the only thing is there is voice, so you're hearing track.
Okay, I knew there was some, recorded stuff, but I knew it wasn't because the who was it that got caught lip syncing back in the
Milli Vanilli and those guys?
No, I mean in the Super Bowl, right?
Oh.
There was somebody that but and so they do. I know they don't do the voices anymore, but or maybe it wasn't the Super Bowl, but it was a big. Anyway, I know that, but I didn't realize that the instruments weren't really played.
Yeah, I think I think maybe the drums. There's some most like the guitar and leads and pianos and stuff like that is.
But Alicia Keys had to have surgery on her vocal cords, so I don't know if she'll ever sound like herself again.
Well, she never really was a good singer, so that's just.
She's a great songwriter, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we won't. See, this is not what we was going to talk about today. But you gonna make us popular. She all right. Some people, I guess, when you cheating with a married man, I guess you can write some songs. There might be a few things you can say.
See, I don't know anything about Alicia Keys other than a couple of her songs, and really just that one album. She's got the one album that was huge. She's a bad person,
bruh.
I don't know. I did think that Usher, he mentioned prayer and trusting God in one of the transitions, and I was like, that probably honors God more than that he gets us at.
Okay, that's what I was going to talk to you about. Hold on. So a lot of people were super Christians and didn't watch the Super Bowl. So I actually went and got that ad. So he gets his ad. I wanted to bring it in here. Where's it? There we go. Boom. Boom. There we go. I'm gonna bring it in right now. There it is. All right. So I went and let me go find the other part of this ad. So, dude, I saw this ad and I immediately went to Twitter because I was pretty ticked. Here, I'm gonna just try and play it for everybody. See if they let me play it. Oh, good. Here it is. All right, for those people listening, Jason's gonna try and give a great voiceover for it.
Punk grandson washes feet of grandfather. What's this?
This is the police officer.
Police officer
washing a 2-liter water bottle over the. I don't know what you can't be careful, Jason. You might want to be careful here. I don't know what you can say. A black guy in the alley that looks like he's been sleeping there or selling drugs in this alley.
Okay. Oh, you think he's homeless? You think that's the?
Well, I mean, he ain't got no shoes on.
Well, yeah, but it's because nobody has any shoes in the entire thing. But he paid a lot for that haircut if he's homeless. This is the problem with AI images. I think they're all AI images.
They said they were actually a photographer who took them. We'll talk about that too. But I think they're all AI images too. I think they're merged AI images with photography. Yeah. His shirt looked dirty, so I don't think he actually is. What is he? Gangbanger?
I don't know.
Drug dealer?
But like look at he's got the chains. He's got the nice haircut, but then he's also homeless.
That's because he stole them, and that's why he in the alley.
Okay.
But a police officer is washing, and
officer,
not a white police officer, by the way. It looks like a Mexican police officer is washing his feet. I think he would get better if it was a white guy. Anyway,
don't ask me.
The popular girl at school is washing the unpopular girl's feet. You think?
Wait,
that's what that's supposed to be?
I think the girl with the red hair is the popular one, and the other girl is trying to be her. I don't know. Anyway, I can't.
But you know it's true.
In this one,
cowboy washing an Indian's foot.
See, there are shoes here. See, he's not homeless. You said nobody else has shoes in here. I think the other black guy's homeless. They both.
No, look, he has no shoes on though.
No, but there's boots here. If you go back,
yeah, he took his boots off. Oh, I see.
You see, there's no. Oh, Deuce got shoes on the left side. I see. This just covered up. Okay, so he might not be homeless. I might have messed that one up. There we go.
It's true.
I like cowboy washing the Indian's foot. You got the abortion protesters over there
Washing the murderer's foot.
holding the upside down signs, say save the unborn, while a mom is washing her daughter's foot who just had an abortion. Maybe, I don't know. It's just a picture.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a picture in front of a family planning
clinic
with protesters that don't seem to be really engaged, while there's a lady sitting here rubbing the feet of and washing the feet of a young girl who doesn't seem to be pregnant, but probably just had an abortion. That's what I think they want to convey.
I think that's what they're trying to convey too.
This one upset me.
You think? It's because they're trying. It's because they're going after you. I mean, I'm not. And anyway, you got a girl, a younger girl, washing the foot of an alcoholic
Or crackhead. Makes you say
maybe. Yeah,
the alcohol, because you got the alcohol.
You got all the alcohol over there and the cigarettes.
Right. And, no.
Precious heart.
Oh, I get this one. Clean air now. Oh.
Okay, so it's an oiler washing the feet of a environmental activists who wants clean air, and so he thinks she's the bad guy because she wants clean air.
Yeah, he would hate clean air.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
Yeah.
I was standing.
An immigrant in front of a bus and a suburban white lady.
A suburban white lady's washing the foot of
a Hispanic
or
mom with the
South,
baby in her arm.
South American immigrant, maybe.
Yeah, South American immigrant. How about that? Yeah, and a white lady on her knees washing her feet. Yeah.
You were there.
Another suburban mom.
Yep.
Washing the feet of a Muslim woman with her husband, the suburban mom's husband, looking judgingly from the corner.
Is that judgingly, or is like, am I gonna get my foot washed? Is her husband gonna do it? This is weird. And this is why we're not Christians. All right.
Yeah.
Two worlds collided.
This looks like so this one has a black lady and maybe an Indian woman and a crowd.
Oh, because it's and the black people are yelling no censorship, and the Asians are yelling shut him up, silence hate. So
yeah, I see what they're giving the black and Asian hate that's going on. That kind of thing.
But no censorship is what the bad guys are saying.
And they could never tear.
Now this one, you got two old guys in someplace, old shabby cookout
old restaurant down south,
just taking a bath with their feet together. Now this one is interesting because they're not actually washing each other's feet, but they're just
washing their feet together.
Yeah, because that one trope, blacks entering the back. I think that's why they got them old and like not drinking from this water fountain, so that way they're confused.
Okay, yeah. And then you've got the Roman Catholic priest, the white Roman Catholic priest in California. Is that California or Florida?
Sure.
And on the shore, on the beach.
Yeah. This ain't happening in Florida.
washing the feet of a gay black man on his knees. Jesus didn't teach hate. He washed feet. He gets us, all of us. So this is first off, if they were trying to make these into real, if like I know that they apparently said that they are real photos,
Yeah.
but they failed because it looks like AI. The whole time I was like, how much money did they spend on a bunch of mid-grade AI photos, and then put them on the Super Bowl? So just the straight quality of the ad, I thought was really, I mean, it's just photos. They raised what, $100 million with a plan on raising and spending $1 billion
No.
the purpose was to, they said, we're going to make Jesus the most
As they said, all these
no, it is. All the images in the spot were shot by international fine art photographer
Julia Wilton Batten.
But that's they paid a lot of money for photos, and that were intentionally hard to understand. I can't tell if they were trying to be intentionally,
You think they were hard to understand?
Well, some of them were, but what they said at the beginning, because I've met and interacted with some of the folks that have given money to this. What they said in the beginning when they were starting off was, we are going to make, the Bible, the New Testament talks about how Jesus got famous, and we're going to use brand marketing to make Jesus's brand the most popular brand in the country, right? And they got people with a lot of money to give up a lot of money for that goal. And then they went out and they hired a left-leaning, non-Christian, who's a marketing person, who's fiercely passionate about DEI. That's what she loves to push, diversity, equity, and inclusion, to show that Jesus is not owned by the conservatives. That was how it was put in the when they actually said, here's what we want to do. Here's the branding that we want, is that Jesus is not owned by the church or conservatives. Which a non-political Jesus is a leftist ideal, right? And it always has been. So it's not saying that we're going to have no politics involved. What they're saying is only leftist politics are going to be allowed in our ads. And so they've accomplished that by making Jesus into a moralist, who is just, where his life is a model of high morals, and that is therefore a good, that's how he should be known, or how we can come to know him, is as a model for our morals. That's something that really does go back to that Gnostic enlightenment that says religion is something internal. Religion has to do with morals, but the externals of life, politics and such, are a-religious or non-religious, and that's something that the evolution of religion, and that's the term that the Enlightenment philosophers use, is the evolution of religion was something that moved from a purely external thing to a purely internal thing. It moved from a purely physical thing to a purely spiritual thing, right? And so religion used to be about controlling society, and religion was necessary in the ancient world because it was a part of the evolutionary process. But now that we've been enlightened, religion is an internal thing, and we no longer run our externals according to religion, but we use whatever it is, natural law. We use what some people said. We use science. This is something that Eric Voegelin tracks through the actual writings of Enlightenment and modernist philosophers and thinkers in Modernity Without Restraint is one of the books. Science, Politics, and Gnosticism. What's the other one? Political Religions. That he wrote a book called Political Religions. That does that talks about this, and it's basically that the thing that religion, quote unquote religion, and this is something that we have accepted all of the definitions of the Enlightenment for all these categories, and they're not coming from the Bible anymore. So religions, the place that religions held in the ancient world have been, or not in the ancient world, but really in the Middle Ages, the place that Christianity held has been replaced by our political affiliation, right? So it used to be that
it's funny. And then I'm thinking about that's exactly what made Russia come together. I was listening to Putin's interview with Tucker.
Oh, I haven't listened to it yet. And that's
really one of the things that he talks about. What unified Russia was the baptism. Like we were coming together. It was language, and then one coming underneath one religion, and that's when he talks about it's kind of like their heyday is that they were all one religion.
Right. Well, and so Putin. I'm curious. I'm interested to listen to that interview partly because Putin. How many years ago was it now? It was about 10 years ago that he said he'd become a Christian, left behind his atheism. And so I am curious to see what effect that has ended up having on him and the way he thinks. And, because he wasn't a good guy 30 years ago, 40 years ago. He was one of the leaders of the bad guys in the atheist communist. But what he said was, in studying the history of Russia, he realized that what the effect that Christianity had for good, and that it was what made Russia into Russia, and so he converted to Russian Orthodoxy from atheism. So, and you think, okay, well, and I don't know what I mean. There's a language barrier and all that, so I don't know exactly what that even means, but I thought this would be an interesting place because you've got a similar story with Tucker Carlson, right? So he just a few years ago said in the studying of history, and he just realized, Christianity's got to be true, and he converted to Episcopalianism in New York, goes to Episcopal Church.
Says hardly Christian.
is that how he puts it?
It's barely Christian.
Episcopal Church, but he is. So you've got those two. So I thought that would be an interesting conversation for that reason. I also think that and this is, I think that it was that invading the Ukraine is the wrong way to solve the problem. But the problem of the Ukrainian, the Ukrainians being the money laundering spot for all of the leftist, people trying to basically turn Europe into a leftist utopia. The largest donations to the Democratic Party came from Ukraine, for Ukrainian banks. You've got the World Economic Forum using the Ukrainian banks to change all their money. You've got all of that going on top of the fact that you've got BlackRock making significant installations. You've got some American weapons, bioweapons factories going in Ukraine, right on the Russian border. You've got all this stuff going on that is Ukraine has made themselves a threat to Europe, and now you've got all these major loans that we've given to the Ukrainians in order to fund their side of the war. All of them have the money has to be spent in certain ways, and every single aspect of the spending that they have to use the money for is in a BlackRock company, right? So every penny of the money that we give to them has to be spent in a BlackRock company, and then all of that land that they're fighting for, at the end of the day, is going up for sale if they win the war, right? So if they win the war, the land they're fighting over, that piece of land that's the most productive farmland in the country, on the continent of Europe, right? 80% of the grains, I believe, are grown on that land that they're fighting over. That is going to be put up for sale at the end of the war, and BlackRock right now owns the most farmland in the world, and so I'm sure that's a big part of the plan. I mean, we'll see. That's just future prediction, but that land is going to go up for sale and be bought up by these major international corporations, right? So really, this war is an international catastrophe that's happening right now. Where more resources of Europe are being funneled into, and now the Americas are being funneled into these international corporate conglomerates through the war, right? By means of the war. The war never helps anyone but the corporations. So, and this has been happening since really World War II was.
I was going to say, turn the century.
That's when we realized the possibilities.
Yeah, because I think you're right. Anyway, no, you're right.
Yeah, so I don't think World War II was necessarily started to benefit the corporations, but I think the corporations that were birthed out of World War II used their money to make sure that wars kept happening, and the war is so far happening not in America, but I don't think they're going to care that much where their weapons are used. This is an Iron Man 1 situation where you've got but I don't think we're going to get a Tony Stark philanthropist out of it, unfortunately.
Don't leave Elon Musk out of that conversation. He did buy X.
No, you're right. He is the one that is.
And by the way,
a lot of this information would have stayed hidden if he wouldn't have bought X.
That's my whole point. So I think we do, if you're going to follow the narrative, I think we do have a Tony Stark. If the part of warfare is all information, and especially with America, since we get to control our politics, or at least seems like we get to control our politics. It's written in our bylaws that we get to control our politics. That information is everything. Every decision we make is based off information. If you can control the flow of information, then you can control the nation. And so Elon sees that. And so he's like, let me put $44 billion into this company so that he's got interests in the same way BlackRock does. He's got interest in every nation in the world, right? With what he's doing. Elon is international. He's got satellites in space. Right, like, so he's servicing the world right now, and everything
what's great though is he understands, because of the way he's built his company, he understands that peace benefits him and war does not.
That's right. That's right.
And when you've built a company that's benefited by war, then you're going to subsidize more war.
No,
and, so. I mean, I honestly think that the candidate that was run against Trump, what's her name?
Nikki Haley.
That Nikki Haley, the reason that she's such a warmonger is because of where her money comes from, right?
I mean, she's put their interest.
she benefits from more war. You see the same with Biden. The last thing that happened to Trump before he got quote unquote voted out was his conversation with the Ukrainians about the fact that they'd been infiltrated and that the money was being aid money was being misappropriated to these corporations, right? And they're like, we've got to get rid of him. And so they quote unquote leaked this conversation,
which was illegal, but nobody's talking about that.
Yeah, it is. But when you listen to the whole thing, Trump was absolutely in the right. And we see now that what he was saying was, if this doesn't get dealt with, there's going to be war, and he's trying to stop war. I mean, there was less war in the world after Trump's 4 years because he understands that war doesn't benefit anyone except for the ultra wealthy corporations of the world, right? Everyone else is hurt by war, right? People are hurt by war, and so you should want no war. And so he fought for that. And then here's the thing: like, I wasn't a huge fan of his domestic policies, the way that he thinks about domestic spending and things. I'm not a big fan. I don't think he's necessarily got a great social moral compass, but it is undeniable that his international policy, if you don't want war, his international policy was superior to any president we've had since maybe Calvin Coolidge in terms of the ability to oppose war from your position as president. So, yeah.
Okay, so I took you on a sidebar. We went over to another end, but I want to go back to what you were talking about, where you were saying that the religion was replaced with kind of politics. I want you to finish that thought. And so religion has been replaced, and what was it?
Yeah. So religion has been replaced with political affiliation.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to ask you something about that. But when you say that, like, I'm trying to see, and that's related to the ad He Gets Us, and you're saying this is all coming from the Enlightenment. So but when I see the He Gets Us ad, all I see is a political ad.
Right. But what folks on the left say is, we are neutral center, right? You are being political with your religion over there. That's the way that they talk, because and I don't mean this in a conspiracy theory way, but that's the Marxist way of that's the Marxist way of doing rhetoric, right? You assume the center, you assume that we're the normal ones and you're radicals, right? We're just normal center people that just love others, right? That's us. You're the radicals. You're radical hate. You're the ones doing radical hatred.
Yeah.
Right. And the way that Marxism as an ideology does that is by shifting the Overton window, by the people that are actually their radicals. You've got the people that are out like spiking trees to kill lumberjacks, where you pound a giant. Have you not heard of this? Right? They want it to save the trees. They pound these into just a handful of them. They just pound a giant steel rod in, and so when they go to cut down the tree, it cuts the chain flies off and kills the lumberjack.
No way.
That happens once, that happens twice. No lumberjack will go in and cut down those trees anymore, right? Because of terrorism. That's terrorism. You don't have to do it to every tree, because it's not good for the tree either, but you do it to just a few and it kills a couple of lumberjacks, right? You've got radical leftist environmentalists that value trees over people that do something like that, and you get nothing from the left in terms of saying, they might say like, well, that's not the right way to go about it, but they're doing the right thing. That's the most condemnation you can get. I mean, this is why have everybody burning down cities, throwing mysterious bricks that show up on pallets that nobody knows where from, and you get one arrest maybe. The guy that live twitched his burning of Target through his streaming channel, like that guy got arrested, but you've got everybody else is in there,
yeah,
right? And you don't get other arrests, so they know they need a scapegoat, and so they pick one, so that they can say, well, look, we are still upholding the law, but really that the way of assuming the center is so you don't argue. You don't come in and argue for your position. You assume your position is the center, and you make everyone else have to argue with you. And pretty soon everybody starts to say, well, that's the center normal position, the majority position, even when it's not, right? So this is the after the ball talks about the conversations that they had about this, but I don't think it's a conspiracy.
Desensitize and convert, right?
Yep, jam, desensitize, and convert. And so that started with, for example, with the trans push. That started all the way back in the late 60s. It really wasn't a push then, though. It was just you had some weirdos on the fringes, and they then became pawns in the scheme of some people's, right? Those folks weren't trying to push anything, but they were pawns in the scheme to Christianize because if you remember the Freudian way of thinking about this, you've got your id, your basic desires, and then you've got the super ego, which is society's expectations of you. And then your ego is there in the middle. And if your ego is causing all sorts of problems, if you've got psychoses, if you're sad, the options are you can change your id, work to change your desires because you've got the wrong set of desires, or you can change society. And that is in that theory is going to make everybody feel better, right? So that's why they go around saying you're going to have what do you want these kids to commit suicide because of societal expectations? We've got to change societal expectations or these kids are going to commit suicide, right? That's a Freudian argument.
So here's I'm trying to think, remember when the Black Lives Matter, like you said, their rhetoric is really good, right? And so it puts you immediately on a defensive position where you argue from their center, and they've already won the argument if that's what the situation is, right? So what is the type of rhetoric that we need to be using for this? Like, I really like what Nate Wilson did with Black Lives Matter, right? So Black Lives Matter, and then somebody said, well, all lives matter, and then that just didn't work, right? That just never, Blue Lives Matter. It's like, yeah, you still, and they never were able to really create an argument against Black Lives Matter because it's such a great statement. What are you trying to say? Black lives don't matter? And it's like, we're just saying the people who are hurting, their lives matter. Okay, so they make the argument. No one really came up with it. And Nate did a really great job of like, all Black lives matter. Now, all of a sudden, they're in conflict with their own statement. Right? And it's such a great rhetorical, and all he did was add one word, right?
Yeah.
And now they sit up there and you just own the center. What is the way? Because this is really weird, because as you were talking, I'm thinking to myself, so here's one question. What's the rhetorical response to something like this? And here's a statement that's kind of wrapped up in that question. The reason I'm asking is because this is the left having already fully infiltrated the Christian mind, that Christians who are on our team are looking to leftists to help us message something for they're being played. Yeah. It was flat out. I mean, the Green family, a good family, they're a part of this movement. They've invested into this movement, right? And so
they invested in the original pitch.
Sure.
They got lied to, is what happened.
But part of the reason that they were able to swallow this lie is because they are concerned about how the world views Christianity. And so they're trying to help turn, because they're getting hit with all sorts of stuff because, as Aaron Wrenn said, we're living in a negative world, negative Christian world. And so Christianity is not good. And they're like, wait a second, if this is all about marketing, how do we market the good of Christianity? So it makes sense. And I get it, but the best marketing that we have is hard work, but before that even is the gospel of Jesus Christ. There it is. Like, that's the power of God into salvation. We don't need a marketing strategy to figure out how to change how the world views Christians. It's really simple. We got a history for this. You preach the gospel and you go and die and you work hard, right? Maybe not in that order. How about working hard and die goes?
But how what is more fundamental about us, our religious identity before God or our national identity?
See, I don't like, I think it's a false dichotomy, right? Because God placed you strategically in a place to be that, I think but
which one do we receive at birth?
Are you John the Baptist?
No, I mean, in the American church, which of those two things do we receive at birth?
Are you a Baptist?
Right. That's the question, though. So if you are born an American and later you add on being a Christian, then your American identity is more fundamental. That is and your sacraments are telling you that.
Yeah. I would say
thing God gave us
to
give us our identity, our covenantal identity, tells us in the American church that our politics is more fundamental than our Christianity.
Really good, Jason. I would say the most fundamental identity that I have is Christian. Is it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But right. but Christian,
that's not what your sacrament. That's not what the sacraments of most churches are telling us.
Right. Oh, you better shut up.
This has to do with and that flows out of our compromise with the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment came along and said, you can have your religion, but it has to be secondary to your politics. And we said, okay, we'll just start baptizing people upon profession of faith. They get their citizenship at birth. Right? So our sacraments speak loudly. And I mean, really, what it comes down to is this is the keep going. I'm listening. Let me think through.
That's
that's an
Enlightenment thing, huh?
Mm-hmm. Right. So, there's no way to fight this without reform in the church. I mean, this is the thing that drives me nuts about people that are like worried about Jewish conspiracies, and like, dead things don't rot. I mean, living things don't rot. Only dead things rot. And so you look at the rot and the people's ability, the left's ability to come in and, push the church out and around. And well, the church has been dead and dying in America for a long time. The fact that almost none of the historic church buildings still have faithful Christian services in them tells us that the church has been in exile from itself a long time, right? That doesn't happen when you faithfully continue to preach the gospel. When you stop preaching the gospel, God kicks you out of your cathedrals. It's just so
the church has its own covenantal identity problem, which is why So is this part of like the church gave up on the world?
Yeah, I think the church gave up on the world, but the church also let the world's redefinition of its role in.
And how did it do that? You have to think little of the world. You can't, we would never let the world redefine communion. Why would we? And so to let them redefine
Historically
the world-
in America, it happened when we, my take is that in America, when the church stopped basically opposing slavery, race-based slavery in America, the church gave up its public voice, right? So it said, we're gonna, and so because that was the argument, right? So in England, it happened at a different time, because in England, the you literally had people on the floor of the House of Lords opposing who is the guy that in England that argued against the slave trade being allowed in England. His name is escaping me. The movie Amazing Grace was about him. You had people telling him, leave your religion at home. Religion, this is politics here. You know, you don't do politics with an open Bible. You know, you don't, right? All of the arguments that we hear now about that there's no place in politics for religion. England heard those.
William Wilberforce.
William Wilberforce, yeah. England heard those, and William Wilberforce stood and was the scapegoat basically in that situation, who took all of that heat and won. There were other things going on, right? They had a whole they were doing plays and publishing books and novels and all sorts of things. There was a huge, what you would call a media push at the time, in the fictional media space that changed the opinion of the English people to William Wilberforce's opinion. But William Wilberforce stood and said, Jesus hates kidnapping. Jesus hates selling people. Jesus hates, right? He stood in the public sphere, and over and over, there was a really great biography that I read about William Wilberforce, and it went through the rhetoric that was used against him. And it's all, leave your religion out of the public square. There isn't any place for the Bible here. The Bible is for private religion. You know, all of that. Religion is a private thing. This is the public. This is public. All those arguments. And he just refused to step down and won, right? So that was a huge thing at the time. Well, the abolitionist movement had to move outside the church, right? You didn't have you had the church turn against, so that where the House of Lords, the Christians ended up banding together and bringing down slavery, but the House of Lords, the bishops sit on the House of Lords. So the Christians binding together there is the church doing it, right? Well, the church still had a public voice here. I mean, that's the reason we still have nonprofit tax status in the church automatically, is because the church has always had a public voice, and its job was to be a public institution. But when the church's public institutional voice all said, the church is a private institution, we're not going to speak about slavery, that's something that the politicians have to figure out. The public voice went away, and it's went away slowly over time, but it even retreated out of the you had again in the 60s, you had a group of religious leaders who basically would put together what was and wasn't allowed to be released publicly in theaters by Hollywood, right? It was a group of religious leaders that put that together. One year they just said, hey, we're not going to do that anymore. They weren't forced out. They weren't pushed out. They just said, this is a public sphere thing and religion is a private enterprise. Right? So the church retreated out of the public sphere. It wasn't forced out. And it retreated because it had redefined itself according to Enlightenment categories. So in order to retain its academic respect, right? Because the academy was the one using those categories. In order to retain its academic respect, it retreated out of the public sphere. So we bowed and scraped and walked away, so that they would keep handing out PhDs at Yale divinity to us. I mean that's what happened. But that happened a long time ago. I mean, 100 years ago.
Wasn't Yale ours? Yale was ours.
It was, but the academic institutions were the first to get compromised. They were easier to compromise than the pulpits, but you had to compromise them first because they trained all the pulpits. So this is where you had Machen go to Germany to get his training in divinity, his MDiv, and they were so much further along in their modernism because Kant had kind of destroyed the mind of the church already. The church had destroyed its own mind by accepting Kant's categories, really. That he came back and he said, and it had the realization, I think, by the Spirit's prompting, that the American church was following along behind, and we needed a seminary that was going to truly teach the gospel. And he was right, because Princeton falls shortly thereafter. Yale really fell just before that. Harvard divinity had gone completely up in smoke as well. Like, all of those things were Christian in their origin. But the academic respectability is a powerful drug that we need to hate. Now,
are you familiar with the after party? I'm trying to find it right now.
the after party. That sounds really familiar.
It's David French and Russell Moore and I can't remember this guy's name. They basically, I'm trying to find the video clip.
Is this the George Soros funded thing?
Yes.
Yeah. I knew it sounded like a
It
source.
is. It's Rockefeller.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Have you seen the clip where they talk about let us handle your politics? I'm trying to find it for you. Oh, what's this guy's name? I'm looking it up right now. Oh, that's not. Come on. I played the clip on Cross Politic. It goes right along with what you're saying about this kind of redeeming Babel. I'm trying to find
but we got to make sure that we do get to the point where we talk about how the church as an institution engages in politics, because I think a lot of times what people do is they say, "Oh, we can't be apolitical," but then the church does its politics in exactly the same way. The church starts thinking of itself as a voting bloc. Thinking that that's where its influence is, but it's not.
Well, okay, here goes. I found it. This is, I think this is, let me see if I can
It's tempting to think, oh, I've got to preach the sermon.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to try and bring it in. Present. Oh, I'm in the wrong browser. What were you saying about politics? How the church thinks?
Well, because we have already compromised on at the level of identity, and when we go to fight, when we try to get the church to enter the political realm, we think that it has to enter the political realm the way any old institution does, and we think of it as a voting block, because voting is where the real power is. But the church is not a voting block. That's not what makes it political, right? The church is the body of Christ, and the voice of Christ created the world. And now the voice box of Christ has been put into the church, right? And so we aren't a voting block. We are a separate polis, or a separate institution, a public institution that and it's really word and sacrament and church discipline that are our powers to transform the world. But we're a transformative institution.
It's a real government that has
it's a real government that has a real transformative power in the world, that is layered over the world with family government and civil government, right? So all of these are real governments, and they're layered. And so it's the jurisdictional. When we try to say we've got to get political, and what we mean is get control of a different jurisdiction, then
it's tempting to think, oh God,
we actually are less powerful in the world than how God intends us, because what we need to do is run our own jurisdiction well.
That's really good. You know, when it's there. What I'm noticing, and I've been noticing a lot recently, there's a tendency to want to collapse governments into one sphere, which it must be part of the Enlightenment too. I just don't know how. But
it's the democratization of everything. Right? So the only real government is individual government, and then we give every other institution its reality by our vote.
Okay, I hope somebody needs to write that down. And so, but I'm noticing that my question almost to everything now is, which government is in charge of this situation, and and here's what I'm noticing, and what authority do they have, right? And here's something I'm noticing. I'm noticing that in one way or another, each government is touching the situation, right? Each government is touching, when it comes to a crime, there are parts of the church that it deals with that in a certain way, and it preaches against it, and it calls people to repent. It restores people. The home government actually has something to say about that situation, and they're dealing with that situation, and they have certain sanctions that they can put on this. And then the civil government, depending on how far we are into this, can actually offer the death penalty or some sort of corporal punishment publicly even. And so these governments work together. They're not separate entities, but I know we're not asking that. We don't even think like that anymore about how that works. I want to play this clip for you. This is from the, because it just hit right when you were saying it. This is from the after party. I can't remember. I'll find out who this guy. It's Curtis Chang. And he's talking about how to take the bullseye off of pastors' backs as it relates to politics.
It's tempting to think, oh God, I've got to preach the sermon that will, like, reframe everything, solve all my problems. And that turns out to be, for most pastors, a really flawed process, because the Sunday morning sermon is actually a really bad way to deal with something like politics. It's one-to-many communication. It's limited. People are bound to misunderstand even, a small thing you say. People will filter what you're saying through their existing political biases. In 30 minutes, I guarantee you, if you go up on Sunday morning, in most congregations and you try to preach the one sermon on politics that you haven't been preaching on for a long time, your Monday morning inbox is going to be an ugly scene. And that's honestly why most pastors, or many pastors, don't preach on politics on Sunday morning, because they instinctively know my Monday morning inbox is going to look awful if I do that. So the challenge we need is to give churches and pastors a way to head in towards healthy Christian politics that doesn't force them to preach this magical Sunday morning sermon that will solve everything. And the after party is our attempt to do that, so that you don't have to do all the heavy lifting, and also, frankly, you don't have to take the bullseye, right? Because this way, if you run the after party in your small group community, in your Bible studies and so forth like that, then if people get mad, they get mad at Curtis, Russell, and David. They get less mad at you. You can have plausible deniability, right? You could just say, hey, I don't agree with everything these guys say, but I think they're worth listening. That's the classic move, you do make as a pastor, right? If you want to inject something, but not have to take all of the shots for it, which you shouldn't have to take all of the shots for. That should be part of our job, is to do that. That's the partnership here.
That's the partnership here.
Dude, that is evil.
Pure evil. Yes. But that goes right along with what you were saying. Right? Like, we've gotten this separation there. And the way that so Russell Moore and David French and Curtis Chang, they want to be the ones who disciple your people on politics. And you know what? If you are interested in somebody to do that, then you are just doing your job horribly as a pastor.
Well, for one, that is he even says, like, he mocks the idea that sermons are magical. Sermons are magical.
You better say it. Come on now.
So you got to get this out of your sermon, because, we're going to preach a magical sermon. Yes, every Sunday. That's what pastors do. They preach a magical sermon. The sermon is a means of grace. It's in our. What
do you think the Holy Spirit does?
Yeah, it's in our. It's in our. I mean, as Presbyterians, and I'm pretty sure that's even in the 1689. Although I'm not as familiar with 1689, but I know it's in the Three Forms of Unity. I know it's in the Lutheran understanding. I know it's in the Presbyterian understanding that the sermon is a means of grace, because the Holy Spirit promises to use it to recreate the people, the world. You've got a people made of words, the words of Jesus, and then the words of Jesus are declared over them, and they are recreated by it. Now, if you try to use, that's why if you try to use the pulpit for something like, hey, I'm gonna try and use this to become governor of the city and turn it into to stump speeches, that's wrong also, because that's not but that's like shooting too low, not shooting too high.
That's right.
Right. And they're like, hey,
absolutely, yeah,
quit shooting too high with your sermons and expecting them to just magically transform people.
That's
why are you getting into the pulpit if you don't believe that? If you don't believe that, go get a job delivering the mail.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the book that taught me this was Preaching with Confidence.
I got that book, yeah,
by James Dane, where he just goes through and shows both the Bible and the Reformation interpretation of the different passages about what the sermon is. That the sermon is the actual voice of God. That the pastor's job is to be the voice box of the body of Christ in that moment, and then when Jesus speaks, the world is changed. Right? So, the sacraments, and this is the sacraments are in the other, I don't know, node of the authority of Jesus it's another means of grace, where, so I mean, it's why I think word and sacrament, we always, at least historically, the church has always been really, really insistent that word and sacrament are together, and
we don't get that no Sundays.
Yeah.
Most people go to churches that don't have communion.
But exactly. But the word and sacrament, their existence is a threat to a political religion. Their existence is a threat to tyranny, right? But we have happily shoveled them off and replaced them. I mean, most of what we would call successful churches in the country have replaced preaching, and they don't do the sacraments. Right. So it's just, but that's what happened. That happened to the church when it was going through its modernist controversy, what we call the liberal church, right? When it was embracing liberalism. I mean, Christianity and Liberalism by Machen is a really great book about this. It says, look, liberalism is a different religion. But one of the reasons is because it got rid of things like the fundamentally miraculous nature of the sermon. Right? It's in the way we talk, the sermon is a miracle. Right? Now, it's a miracle accepted by faith that but because we have accepted a mechanistic view of the world, we the category left for what the sermon does is magic, is, in that system, is miraculous. But because we know that it's the normal means of grace, we wouldn't call it magic. But in their system, it is magic. That's something that do you believe in magic? Yeah, but that's what Vogelin points out, right? He says in a communist understanding, or in a modernist understanding, or in a mechanistic understanding, what the prophets are doing is wizardry, right? They're speaking from outside the system. Right, they are speaking because everything, and that whoever that dude is, Chang, he's functionally explaining a mechanistic. He's a functional atheist. I don't know if he's a Christian or not. Is he? Okay.
Oh yeah.
But he's functionally an atheist, right? Where he's like, "Hey, people are going to misunderstand. This is not. It's one speaking to many, and all.
You can cover yourself.
Yeah, you can cover yourself, right? That's what I mean. It's literally, Jesus says that this is what happens when you get people sneaking in that are not real shepherds. Right? These are hired hands that he's talking to, and they're like, "Ooh, I can cover my backside. I don't have to worry about dying for the sheep. This is great." Right? It's like, yeah, you're a false shepherd at that point. You are a hired hand. If you're not willing to die for the sheep, you're going to have a lot of people that want to talk to you. You're like, if that's not your goal as a pastor, what are you doing?
So you said that was one thing.
Oh, no. There's a really great quote. So this was, I read this in a one of the biographies of Spurgeon. The man that took over for Spurgeon at the London Tabernacle was an Arminian that was really into the new means of evangelism that Charles Finney had developed, right? So and he was trying to explain it to some of the people that had been there a long time, and why he wanted to add in, this anxious bench and everybody, and come forward if you want to accept Christ, and this sort of manipulative way of preaching, and he said, he was sitting there and explaining it to the older people in the church, and he said, "Look, you got to strike while the iron's hot." And a little old lady said, "When Charles would preach, the iron stayed hot till next week." So, with the idea being that it was the Holy Spirit that was at work,
Right.
not Charles Spurgeon. And Charles Spurgeon, he had, I can't remember how many steps he had up to the pulpit, but he would say to himself at each step, "I believe in the Holy Spirit. I believe in the Holy Spirit. I believe in while getting into the pulpit, because otherwise, what are you doing there?" Right? It is the least effective way to guide and direct and change a people is talking to them en masse. It doesn't work as I mean, that's what he said. It's one talking to many. That's not an effective way to change people. And it's true. That is not an effective way to guide and direct and change a people, right? Unless the one who made them is speaking through you his recreative word, right? That's the only thing because otherwise, I mean, Paul says that the church is a barren woman who will have more children than all other women, right? A barren woman is a woman that you look at and say she's not going to have very many kids, or she's going to have no kids, right? The way that God has told us to do it require faith, because they don't work on their own. It's not a system,
Mechanistic system, yeah.
mechanistic system. You can you can raise a mob with a speech, but you don't settle down a mob and get them to go out and start families and have kids and rebuild the world into Eden with the same mechanism that causes mob rule.
So
you got me riled up.
I see that. I was just gonna let you go. I know you guys more. You rubbing your hands together and all. Like, Jason gonna punch his old camera. There's more I want to talk about with that. I think we can bring that up again, but it just made me think about what you just said with the AND campaign, or not the AND campaign, but the He Gets Us campaign.
Yeah.
What is the rhetoric, though? What is the rhetoric we need to have towards this?
I mean, I think that the rhetoric. So
Because you
they're
see,
trying to
jamming you. They're straight up jamming you. Right?
They're trying to take something that is our effective rhetoric, right? And use it against us.
Well, look at the lady who was at the abortion clinic who was washing the feet. The whole washing the feet thing I can break this whole thing down. There's a problem there anyway, but it's
Right.
a great visual. But you know how many times people have been at the abortion clinic saying, "I will take your baby."
Right.
If that's not so, I'm like, they aren't being genuine at all. So, but they are taking our rhetoric as if we're the loving ones.
Yeah, but the whole idea, the feet washing has to do with the way a pastor interacts with his people, right? The way Jesus, as a leader, interacted with those that he was leading. It's talking about the kind of government that the church is supposed to run. It's not talking about how to love your neighbor on the street, right? There is a lot of teaching about neighborliness. That's the thing but what they're trying to do is co-opt the institutional church, right? And say that the institutional church is not nice, because it literally has to do with the way that the church wears its authority towards its people, right? The way the church carries its authority. They are co-opting the language of our authority and saying, "You're mean to us with your authority, and you need to start you need to use your authority to start supporting us out here in the world in our sin. And there's a lot of people that are like, I don't get why this is bothering me, but there's something wrong with it and they can't put their finger on it. But it's because it really has to do with Jesus passing the authority of the authority of the body of Christ as the head of all things, passing it to the church, for the church, I guess, ruling all things for the church, it says in Colossians 1, and that the church is established as the body of Christ on earth. It's established as a real government. The body politic is it's the same. He's purposefully, the New Testament purposefully uses the political metaphor of a body and says, but this is Christ's body, right? The Old Testament people were called Moses's body, right? You've got this body politic. And when Jesus sets up its first group of leaders, he does so by washing their feet to show how they're supposed to carry the authority that he is giving them as ecclesiastical leaders over the institution of the church. And then this commercial comes and says, I want the institutional church to come out here and support my sin. I need the institutional church to start being nice to me about my sin, right? To stop hating. Well, but one of the things that the church does is, with its authority, is create a community that hates murder, for example, right? It creates a community that hates murder, that hates self-destruction, that hates, so that people have a place to flee when they are fleeing a murderous culture. They have a place to flee when they're fleeing a self-destructive culture, right? So if you had, so this is something that things like Teen Challenge, when it's functioning well, and it's when a church starts a teen challenge, which is helps people get off of drugs. When it's functioning well, it's a community that people can come into that hates drug use. So that you have the support you need when you start, because if your friends are like, yeah, heroin, it is what it is, it's no big deal, they're not going to help you when you need to get out of the self-destruction of heroin use, right? So you need a community that hates self-destruction, that hates murder, that hates that hates those things, so that there's a community for people to flee a world that is embracing self-destruction, right? So, but we have a commercial that says, we need you to use this authority, this foot washing authority that you have, the authority of a foot washer. We need you to use that to come in here and tell us that we're okay, or else we're going to call you hateful. This is, and there's a lot of Christians that because they have actually been teaching and believing kind of that same thing. Like, if we were nicer, the world would love us. Because they've been teaching and believing that, they don't know this commercial is going to work on them. But we believe that the authority of the church. Here's the other thing. We believe that the authority of the church is in the pews, because we've been so thoroughly democratized. All right, so that's why that pastor is able to be affected by his quote unquote constituents, because he thinks that it's his job to represent them and make them feel good and make sure the money keeps flowing and make sure people are there, and right. But it's not. He's supposed to represent Jesus to the people in the pews, right? Jesus is the head of the church and he is his ambassador. Jesus is the king. He's the ambassador of the king, and he's supposed to deliver the king's message, period. That's what he does. And trust that the king's message is powerful enough to transform this place into what the king wants it to be, because the message is delivered with the presence of the king in the Holy Spirit accompanying the message, right? And the Holy Spirit is the power that raised Jesus from the dead, and it's the power that we have been promised will be he is the power that we have been promised will be present in the preached word, right? All of this, the authority of the church is not in the pews, right? The authority of the church is an ecclesiastical government that needs to that if there's people in the pews that are trying to manipulate it, it needs to resist that manipulation for the good of the people in the pews, right? It's not a democratic institution, and the few attempts that we have the few times that we've attempted to make it a democratic institution, it has immediately gone liberal, immediately. One of my favorite theologians was a Congregationalist, John Owen, but I think but he was at the beginning of the Congregational movement. It has shown itself to be a huge mistake. We need to recover a church government that as a real government in the world, or we're gonna just remain as useless as we have been.
So, man, you gave me a whole bunch there. But but back to the rhetoric on this. So then our response to this would be what?
Our response is, I think what we should start doing is saying, the foot washing is, Jesus did wash people's feet, and he washed the feet of the leaders to show them how to lead, because we build communities where foot washing is where foot washing makes sense, right? And so if you're interested, you got to join the community. Here's the expectations of the community. So here's a good example. We had a guy, I was talking with a guy who was like, I want to get baptized. And I said, let me explain Christianity to you. And it took a while. And at the end of it, I said, are you willing to give up marijuana to follow Jesus? And he was like, does Jesus expect me to? I said, Jesus expects you to give up everything to follow him. And he was like, I don't think I can. I said, well, then you shouldn't get baptized, because to be a part of the community is to be a part of the people who give up everything to follow Jesus. And he was like, oh, I'm not ready for that. Right. That we need the expectations of the communal life. I mean, first we actually need to develop a communal life. We need the expectations of the communal life to be public, to be known, and we need the communal life to be centered at the center. It's a sacramental community. It's guarded by the sacraments as a sacramental community, and then the Word of God is the pillar of fire and the pillar of smoke that guides the community. And that is our rhetoric. I mean, the rhetoric is the community, the communal life.
It's funny. I think that answer was extremely, extremely unsatisfying. And I think I know why, is because our arguments are not based on a 60-second ad.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you say, it's a community where it's like, if somebody did something that was anti-hip hop, we'd all know it right away. Like, yeah, that ain't it. Because I know the culture. I know that, it's not going to work. Or if it was like, whatever, anything that we understand. This is a horrible way to say this. We understand brands. If somebody came up to you and said, don't do it, Nike, you'd be like, that's not their brand. That's not them. And I think you're making and maybe I'm wrong, but I think you're making the argument that the church has neglected to be who it's supposed to be in such a public way that stuff like that can actually work.
Right. That's exactly it.
And that's why your answer was so unsatisfying, because I don't feel I want something that represents us, like they got that campaign. Be like, aha, when that thing that's supposed to represent us is us.
Right.
How we function, how we move, how we get down there, like that's us.
Right. This is why. So, I mean, the whole Christian media industry right now is broken, and this is just evidence of the brokenness, because the job of a Christian filmmaker or Christian working in marketing or is not to make faith-based movies where everybody else makes non-faith-based movies. Every movie is faith-based. It's just a question of which faith, right? So their job is to be as good of a Christian as they can be, and be as good at their craft as they can. As the craft flows out of them, they if they're working in marketing, they market good things beautifully, right? That's their
Jason,
that's what they do.
This goes back to the show we did where we talked about the priesthood. This is right. This is being a good priest. That's
being a good priest, right? So a filmmaker's job is to make it as good, to tell as good of a story, to tell good stories as well as they can, right? I've been listening to Bach's secular cantatas a lot recently, and you've got they're called secular cantatas because they weren't written for the church, right? So Bach, yeah,
the first Kanye.
Yeah, no, that's Vivaldi. Vivaldi was the Kanye
okay.
of the Baroque period. I have listened to. I've been listening to some of Vivaldi as well, but Vivaldi is, he's the guy that took a lot of church music, because it was so good and because he was so good at it, he happily pushed it out into the secular world, and he loved the Lord. Like, he was an ordained minister who then just was like, well, I can actually serve God better in music, because that's really where my gifting is rather than preaching. He was not a great preacher apparently, but he was a fantastic violinist and a really great composer. And so but his music was so popular that he put the church music is sort of like Ray Charles ended up pushing the church music out into the rest of the world, although Ray Charles wasn't doing it as a Christian. He was doing it as a musician. But but Vivaldi also, he discovered the edges of the instruments. So he developed all the different instruments. He developed the language of what was possible with the violin. People didn't realize what was possible with the violin yet. In the same sort of way that, so every time he would put out a new thing, everybody else said, "Oh, that's possible," and they followed him along. And then Vivaldi would do the next thing, right? So Kanye does that. Everybody sleeping on the 808, and he's like, "Yeah, but have you ever noticed what the 808 can actually do?" And you get 808s and heartbreaks. But Bach, he wrote the secular cantatas, and it was these. It's basically. I mean, it's not. It's basically the invention of opera. So he takes the musical language and he begins telling stories with it in the secular sphere. But for him, it would be like, he got hired to write the argument of the four winds, stuff like that. And because he's a Christian, he does it in a very Christian way, but it's a secular, it's the gods of the west wind, the god of the calm winds, the god of storms, and they come in and they're having an argument. And it's because, who's going to get to choose the weather for this day. That was the birthday of a guy, or not the birthday. It was his name day, which is what in the Middle Ages, some people celebrated birthdays also. It wasn't like illegal to celebrate birthdays, but usually what you would do is if you were named Matthew, then on St. Matthew's Day, you would have a party and celebrate your name day rather than your birthday. So he was put together this story of the four winds and their kind of the fight between the four winds, who's going to choose the weather for the name day of this guy. So, but it's beautiful. The music is beautiful. It's a fully and completely secular story, but he does it in a deeply Christian way. And that is the way that that Christian filmmakers, I think, should think is, what does it look like to tell these stories in a deeply Christian way? Not because not because I'm trying to make propaganda for the kingdom, but because I am the brand ambassador. Right. My life is not, what the art that I make is whatever, right? But my life is the marketing. The church's life is the marketing. We don't have the church doesn't hire a marketing specialist. The church life is the marketing. And but we have become secular materialists in our assumptions, right? We're atheists in our assumptions. And so we think, oh, well, marketing is the way you get your message out now. And so we better use this marketing in a good way. Or we need to brand, we need to develop Jesus's brand better. That's not the way we think, because we don't think the way the world does about that thing, because he's given us church life to do that already, right? It's not somebody else's job. And if you look at the way that they talked about doing it, they're like, we need to show that Jesus isn't owned by the church, and Jesus isn't owned by conservatives, and Jesus, and you think, what does that mean? I mean, other than we want to separate Jesus out from the church, because the church is, the church is a failed brand ambassador, I guess you might say. The church is a failed brand influencer. But it's always been that way. It's never not been a failed brand ambassador. That's part of the fact that that the church is a barren woman who keeps having children anyway. We've never been a good brand ambassador. We've always been this, G.K. Chesterton says the church has gone to the dogs 5 times, and every time the dogs have died, right? So it's because of the Holy Spirit that the church survives, not because because we figured out the right way to do it. This happened in the 90s with the seeker sensitive movement, where there was a study that went around that said the most important thing for church growth is having enough parking. And so all these churches built bigger parking lots because they thought, if a bigger parking lot will mean that I grow. And so you have these churches that built enormously huge parking lots, thinking we're going to get this big, but because we're dumb,
because we want to trust everything but the Spirit.
Everything but the Spirit. Yeah, it's a good thing Jesus died for us, because, and my wife likes to say, yeah, the church is a whore, but she's our whore.